Okay, hello, how's it going? I did make a video about map flow earlier. I've been drinking, so I'm probably not going to even race like even close to what I was doing earlier. So I do apologize, my racing isn't that good, but I've been told I race better when drinking anyway. Anyways, let's get right into the video. So basically, the issue I was having was there was an issue with some players talking about like map flow and stuff like that. So I wanted to explain exactly, what is map flow and why does it matter. So basically what map flow is, it's a transition from one corner into the next corner. Let me go ahead and turn down the sound as well, just to make sure this is good too. I don't want the sound to be too loud either. So I'm just going to turn that down. Anyways, the whole point of that is map flow is basically how you flow from one corner to another, or how you transition from one corner to the next. So a good example of that, let's say I were to start here. Let's say I put like a couple boosters here, something like this. There's a lot of different. We're specifically talking about NASCAR now. Now, map flow matters for any type of like racing game that you play, but for now we're talking about Trackmania and NASCAR. It doesn't matter what version of Trackmania you're playing. So there's many different versions of corners you can use. For example, there's this corner. This is one example of a corner that you'd use. So this is known basically as pretty much a full speed corner. In TMU, this is known as like a 590 corner. In TM 2020, you can actually do 600, save the drift, and possibly into like 610. So this is one example of a corner. I do think it's important to go over the corner types for like NASCAR first. Like I am a flat map racer, but there's a lot of different corner types that we do need to go over. So then there's this type right here. So this corner could be taken a lot faster, and I don't even have like a name for this, but this corner could be taken a lot faster in TM 2020 than TMU. So that's like another example of a corner, and then another example will be, for example, if instead of doing this, you which am I looking for, the other one, right? Yeah, that one. So another example is doing that at the end. So they all kind of yield like similar results, but each of these corners has a different flow to them. It really depends on what you're looking for. This corner has an easier go in, and then you just need to maintain your speed on the exit, not at the wall. This speed basically has a full commitment on going in, but you're rewarded at the exit of the corner. This corner is pretty much average. This is just a normal high speed corner. And then you just have your regular there's actually quite a few different corners here. So in TM 2020, a lot of my maps for TWNE, the pro event, you'll see me use three. So basically this is a 570 corner. You come in at 570, you maintain 570, you end at like 590. It depends. Usually what I would do for mine for good map flow is I'll use this. I actually want to show you the difference between using this and not using this for like map flow and stuff like that. I will do that later. Um, but it really depends on what you want to do. What I will say is like for NASCAR, if you're looking for good map flow, if you're looking for high speed, you really want to make use of these parts right here because these will make it really easy to maintain a high speed and will make it a lot more consistent, while not using them will make it a lot harder. So it really depends on you. But this is a new type of corner for Team 2020. It's using three for NASCAR instead of two. And then, no, the other two more obvious ones is just using two. So, for example, if you just use this, so that's just like a normal two, and then you have like a normal one, so on and so forth, blah blah blah. Anyways, that pretty much just gives you like an idea. So, so there's also like just the regular like hard corner and stuff like that. If you play on my maps, these are the type of corners you can expect to run into other than like non-flap corners and stuff like that. So basically this is like a 590 corner. So these two right here are also 590 corners, but how they're set up is completely different in terms of flow. This one has an easier turn in. This one has a harder, more suicidal committed turn in, so on and so forth. And this one's just like a really fast corner throughout. If you ever watch my streams when I'm making tracks for this corner is like this corner is fucking insane. in TM 2020 in my opinion, but I really love this corner. It's one of my favorite corners to use in TM 2020. If you're playing the TWE NASCAR events every Monday, I forgot what time frame it is, but you can just look it up. You'll see what time frame it starts, and you can play on some of my maps there. But let's get back to talking about like map flow and why it's important. So basically, what map flow means is map flow is how does one corner transition from one corner to another, for instance. So what I wanted to talk about was specifically why map flow is important and why it matters. So I don't want to just like rant about it because this is something that's actually really important for map creators to understand. And even if you don't create maps, it's important for you to understand, map flow and how it works. That way you understand the difference between, are you struggling because the map is good or are you struggling because the map doesn't have good map flow. So a good example of this here would be, for example, I'm going to ignore TM 2020 for now because the other video is up and I ranted enough about that. I mean TMU is what I mean. I'm just going to talk about the map flow with like TM 2020. So like if you're going to make a map in TM 2020, whether it's NASCAR, I personally only race NASCAR. I only really like NASCAR, but it's really up to you. So the point I was trying to make was there was a really big difference between racing on like a map with good map flow and a map with bad map flow. So here I'm going to use two straights. Then I'm going to use three here. And then I'm going to use two here. Right? Well, how many do I want this to be? Let's use like four or something like that. But the whole idea here is just to show you like map flow in general. It doesn't really matter like how I make it. It doesn't need to be the same as the other video. So let's say I make this like two instead of one. Actually, I want the straight to be longer because it's going to show you there's a clear difference between using. I want to show you there's a clear difference between using a longer straight and using a shorter straight, and what this means to map transition and to map and the map flow in general. Okay, because if you race on my maps, you'll see the differences, and I'm gonna explain like what are the effects that you actually want to have on your map. So I'm going to go more in depth with this, basically this explanation now. It's not going to be something that's really simple, so I really kind of do need to explain this a little more so people do understand it. So going from the start, I'm not going to be finishing. I'm not going to be like maximizing or anything like that. I just really want to hammer down the basics. So here. This first corner, as you can see, is really short, so you gotta slow down, right? But the issue is the straight after it is really long. So because the straight after it is long, the map tends to not feel, that good, right? Because you have to slow down into the corner versus flowing into the corner naturally. So how you want to go is you see if you were really trying to like go for it, you couldn't do that. You'd have to slow down. I'm sorry, I've been drinking, so my racing is going to be a lot less than standard. But anyway, and also I can't focus when I play Team 2020. I don't have my focus yet. It doesn't tell me how to take corners, so I really do have to train a lot to be able to do that. But this does show you like pretty much the difference here is that you can't really maximize on this corner, right? So you do have to release, and that is kind of a problem, and that's because I'm using like I forgot how many straights am I using. This is like two or three, right? How many straights is this? So this is like two straights, right? So here's how you would fix this. So the problem is I have to slow down now because there's only two straights instead of three. So the easiest way to fix this issue is simply to just add another straight to it. So if you ever make a track and you notice that you have to slow down, what you have to question is there a purpose of slowing down? In this case, there's no purpose of slowing down because right after this is a long straight. So slowing down actually feels really bad in terms of map flow. So just by adding a straight there, I can make the map feel a lot better. So there's a lot of reasons why you want to make sure your map flow is good and that it actually makes sense, right? That's my fault. But you wanna make sure that everything lines up and everything works the way it's supposed to. So when you're going from one corner to the next, you want to make sure it makes sense. Like here, now I can actually hold my speed on the corner, right? That's a huge difference already, right? It's a completely different map. So it's not the same as, it was before. That's the difference between not having enough straights and having enough straights. At the same time, you don't want too many straights. So I didn't explain that in the other video, but generally what I see is not enough straights, but there's also such a thing as too many straights. Then the map doesn't become as challenging as it should be. Will it have flow? Yes, but will the flow be as good as it should be? No, because the apexes really won't matter that much then. So like here I can hit this like perfectly, but then it doesn't really challenge you that much because you can just tap at that point. No, even if you're like not, I'm a keyboard player, but even if you're not a keyboard player, like look at how little challenge that is. It's at that point, like it's a completely different corner. So one of them I have to slow down in. The other corner is basically effectively a straight now. Like this is effectively now a straight, and then there's like a brief, lapse in that straight we'll have to turn over, right? So depending on what you're looking for, if you're looking for it to be more restraint, then what you do is you just add another one here if you don't like that flow. However, for the most part, I would recommend making sure the flow is more like this, where each corner has a good transition to the other. But if you also want to use, like, for example, a slower map flow, you can actually do that as well. So let's say I were to go with this. So what I would do is if I want to use less and I want to make a slower map flow, what I would focus on is I would focus on basically making sure that this is shorter and going from one corner to the next makes sense. So that's what I wanted to talk about in my previous videos, making sure when you're going from one corner to the next that it actually makes sense when you're going from one corner to the next, that your map flow 100% makes sense, right? So it's really like a logical thing, and it's what you're trying to do with your map. So depending on what you're trying to do with your map, that's going to determine what kind of map flow that you're looking for. I'm also going to talk about the different types of corners for like NASCAR and stuff like that as well, so that way you get a good understanding of that. So here now I have to slow down for the entry, right? But the thing is, I also have to somewhat slow down for the next corner, if that makes sense. But because I have to slow down for the entry now it kind of makes sense. However, I think the straight is still like one too long. I think it would be even better if I just shortened it by one. So basically, the transition from this apex to this apex is a bit long in my opinion, so you might actually want to shorten it so that way the apexes are more aligned with each other. Really good map flow, like maps that have good map flow, you go from one apex to the next. Sometimes you're going to get breaks and stuff like that when you go from different apexes, but the whole point is to make sure that the corners flow into one another. I might even need to make that shorter. Hold on a second, let me see. Because I may need to make that even shorter than I actually did. No, that's pretty good. Okay, so that right there, that's an example. But then here's the other thing. This right here is a regular double. There's more types of map flow than just this. Do you just want a regular double fast, or are you looking for high speed? I love high speed maps. So what I would actually do for a corner like this is not only would I make the map flow, flow in this manner, what I would also do is I would add these, which I was specifically speaking about before. So I like adding these because it means you can hold a lot more speed. So I'm going to show you the different types of forms of adding these and what it specifically does for the flow of the map, and how it affects your car and what you're looking for, as a map designer or even as a racer. Like, what do you like what do you prefer seeing in a map? That stuff is important. So this type of corner means you can have a higher entry speed, but you want your exit speed to be lower. So when you see this type of corner, you can go in hard, but generally you want your exit speed to be a bit slower. But I also want to mention that there's some differences here in the map design that you also need to know. It's really important, and it's what happens after this corner? So there's multiple different ways to take this corner. I would say there's two main ways. One, there's a sharp way where you take it as sharp as possible and slow down towards the exit. This is really good if you have like a chicane, for example. Let's say you want to build a chicane here. This is really good for a chicane to go in sharp, come here, and then slow down, and then you're going to be able to take the chicane perfectly. So this is like one example of, like I said, map flow. And as a map designer, it depends on what you want to do with your map. So I'm specifically speaking about NASCAR here, but even if it's not NASCAR, you can still use, these map design skills to, your preference. So the other way to use it is there's a version of using it as a straight, right? So when you use it as a straight like this, there is more benefit to taking this corner wide, because when you take the corner wide, then you hold more speed onto the straight, and that more speed on the straight will give you more time. Now, obviously, the straight doesn't have to be like just a straight like this. No, there's other versions of straight. For example, if I were to put it, my bad. If I were to put it like this, for example, this is still considered a straight, by the way. So if I were to put a lot of these on here, curse that being sober, but if I were to put a lot of these on here, this would still be basically a straight. So yes, it's a sideways straight and it's diagonal, but this is still considered to be a straight because you're not really turning and you can maintain your speed all the way down this. So this is another example of you don't need to slow down at the end, and now you can maintain your speed. And I can show you the difference between both too. I can show you that now. That way you have a really good understanding of the difference of using this for chicane and using this for, let's say if you want to use it as a straight. Like there's a complete difference between the two. They're not even remotely the same in how you would behave. There's also a difference between how you would make this corner set. There's so many different setups for this, but I'm gonna try to show you like each individual setup so that way it's more, it's more, you can understand it a little better what I'm talking about when I talk about map flow for NASCAR. It's actually pretty interesting once you think about all the concepts for it, and it's kind of important that you understand this. So like you see how this was a chicane, like that's what I'm talking about. You can go so much faster than what I did. It's Team 2020, but I'm not here to show you speed. I'm just here to show you map flow. But that gives you an idea. And what you can also do, you can make this chicane even sharper. So let's say I want this corner to be even more challenging and I want you to actually slow down. Well, in this case, it still matches with the map flow, right? So that's the thing you need to think about is, does this actually match with what I'm trying to get the player to do? So in this case, if you were to try to maintain a very high speed, you're going to be punished for that. I'm going to show you the difference between what happens if you hold a high speed on this corner and what happens if you're willing to slow down, right? So if you're willing to go into that corner, hold more speed, this is what happens. You're in the middle of the corner, right? So it completely changes the dynamics of the map because you reduce the amount of straights that you have. So because I reduce the amount of straights there, what I actually want to do is slightly different. I actually want to go into this corner with as much speed as possible. Then I want to slow down so I can head towards this side of the track. And then I want to turn in just like that. So because of that, the chicane has completely changed. But you know what? That's not the only change you can make to this, right? It's really not. So not only can you make a change like that, you can also make a change so that you can add this onto it. This means that you can hold even more speed than before because of how this corner works. So I'm going to show you that real fast. So now, not only is it a chicane, it's a more reliable chicane. So depending on how reliable you want the map to be, how much speed you want to hold, you could really make use of these, track parts and use them to your advantage. So like here I'm a little sharp, but at the end of this there's this little leeway. Like, do you see this leeway here? So I turned in a little bit late, But that leeway right there, that gives you a good prime example of just like what you can do with your map. Is completely up to you. And then if you want it to be, if you want to give it even more leeway than this, then the only thing you have to do is just add another one of these, right? It's the same thing as before. So with this corner, now you have even more leeway than before. So in this case, it's less about the map flow in this case. It's more like how challenging do you want the map to be? Do you want a high speed map or do you want, a low speed map? So at the beginning, it's more about map flow, and now it's more about, what kind of map do you want? How do you want your map to flow? How do you want your map to transition from one corner to the next? And I can give you a good idea of what bad map flow is after this and just change like a few of the corners, right? I'm just being bad. But yeah, I really do want to show you this. But it'll show you the difference between, what is good map flow and what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, right? That's really what I want to show you here. I don't want to just like rant. I really want to show you like the difference between making a map with like really good flow and making a map with bad flow. Like there's really a big difference between it. So let's say I held too much speed here. Well, now it doesn't really matter because the corner is really easy, right? So depending, like, I'm not sure if that was like obvious to like how different like the flow of the map can be, because the amount of options I now have available to me just because of that one change and that one add of a corner, like that's what I'm talking about. It's not even just like difficulty, like the flow of the map is completely different. And the lines that you would take here, it's like it's not even close to being the same. I can hold so much more speed and I can take so much more risk because the line that I take would be completely different. But all the things I've done is like good examples of how to build like good map flow and so on and so forth. In my, at least that's my opinion anyway. So like you see here, I don't even have to worry about it anymore. I just have to worry about auto drifting. So that's just how many different ways you have of building the same corner to transition into the next corner. So none of those are wrong, however, but I can show you exactly how you know that it's not right, right? So now we need to talk about, how do you know your map flow doesn't match, basically. So let's say I do have quite a few maps that use this. So this is somewhat a different type of map flow. I have quite a few maps that do this. So the only thing this changes is that you need to continue turning after the turn to basically do whatever is asked of you from the map creator afterwards. So I really do like using this type of map flow, for example, because it allows you to have multiple different paths. There's not just like one best path, if that makes sense. Because there's multiple different paths you can take, it means that if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. You can actually adjust from that. Like you see, I could keep going like normal. It's basically the same type of corner. However, I just have to turn into it. But there's a big difference between, for example, if I take off one of these, just a straight, the map flow would change entirely. Like it's not the same map anymore, just from changing this one aspect of it, right? So that's what I wanted to make clear with the previous video was just removing a straight can literally completely change how a map flows, and it could be good or it could be bad, for example. So when I make it this way, as an example, now I gotta slow down because this corner is now blocking me. Now here's the question. Is it worth slowing down because this corner is now blocking me? Is that good map flow or is that bad map flow? So this is one of the things I really wanted to, talk about. It depends. So that's my answer. It really depends on what you're trying to do. So in this instance, I would say it's bad map flow. Why is it bad map flow? Because after this in corner, after this corner, my intentions was a full speed corner, right? So what my original intention was basically to make Probably a corner, I would say, if I were to make a track like this ish. So, anyways, that kind of goes into that corner. All I would have to do is just move that back a little bit. But you catch my drift. So basically, I'll make a corner like this, and then there'll be a straight after it. All I would have to do is just to make this happen is just reduce that by one. It's not too big of a deal. So basically, you're gonna come off a long straight, and then go on here. So the thing is, like, there's a difference between using this and using two. And the difference is, using one straight there, I have to slow down. Using two straights there, I basically don't really have to slow down that much, and I can basically have a lot higher speed. So this is what I mean by map flow. Like, if you're going to make players slow down, there has to be a reason behind it, right? So here I have to slow down, like, I think it's like 470, 480. I don't remember the exact speed that you're supposed to go. Um, I haven't been playing trackmania as much as I should have. Even like TMU, I've been playing it like as much as I should have. But so like here, you do have to slow down. But what's after this? A long straight. So what's really the point of slowing down here, right? That's the point I'm trying to get across. You have this long straight, so why slow down for what's essentially a straight? Instead of making players slow down, why not, have them go faster? And this isn't the only thing that you can do to, improve map flow. So let's say I'm gonna delete all this stuff back here now. So let's say I want you to slow down right here, right? So if I want you to slow down here, then all I have to do is pretty much just use this. Take off a straight, that's fine. Let's say I only use two right here instead. I really want you to slow down, I really want you to focus, and I really want you to pay attention, right? So let's say I did it this way instead. Let's say I made this like a double sharp, right? But instead, let's say I allow you to have like a little bit more speed here. So something like this, right? So let's look at the difference between map flow with the previous map and this one. So there's going to be like a huge difference, and it depends on what you're trying to do. So now, one of the biggest things to pay attention to here is I don't have an extremely like long straight like after the fact, right? So there's actually a reason to slow down into this versus I'm slowing down because the creator just told me to, right? So that's the thing I kind of want to bring across is I don't need this straight to be as long anymore. Like for good map flow, there's a pretty big difference between like I'm gonna allow you to hold a little more speed and kind of I don't need to really make it easier, so to speak. I can just use a normal corner. So because your speed is lower, now I don't have to make the corner easier for better flow because precisely because of that lower speed. And now I could just use this type of corner instead. So you see here I have to slow down, I have to pay attention. Then I can turn in. Pretty much no real issue there. You can hold a little bit more speed here. But because the thing is, like, you see the corner goes from one corner to the next. I'm really good at this because I play like a lot of sim racing games, so I do understand, how to do stuff like that. However, there's a big difference between having this and not having this. I'm going to show you now. Like there's really quite a big difference between whether or not you want to use a corner like this. It really depends on you as a map creator and what you want to do. So there are so many different, options for how you want to make your tracks. Like there's no one way to say that, there's a right way to make it. But for now, I'm just going to show you like the different ways you can make your tracks. And then I'm going to show you how not to make your tracks. So this gives you like a really brief but really good idea on how you want to make your corners, right? So you see here now it's more like a chicane, but even though like this is a chicane, guess what? just because it's a chicane doesn't mean that it's bad. Like you can pretty much go if you really were, trained and good at this, you can go full speed from this corner to the next. Like I said, I've been making maps for quite some time now, a few years in TM 2020. I love, making maps and, the system is really good. But let me show you how not to make this, right? So let's say the way to not make this is to say we're going to keep this the way it is, but we're going to make this like a high speed section. We're going to show you like the complete difference of like how this doesn't make sense from flowing from one corner to the next. It's hard to see. Where am I putting this? Is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay. So this is where this isn't going to make sense, right? Because your speed's basically what's going to happen here is my speed is going to be too high. So it's really the flow of the map really isn't going to make sense after I get past this section. So this is what I'm really trying to like get across to people. It's like this isn't gonna make sense. It doesn't matter what version of Trackmania that you're playing. I didn't hold no speed, but it really doesn't matter what version of Trackmania that you're playing. Like this type of map flow will pretty much be bad. Like no matter what Trackmania you're playing. So here you gotta slow down. That's fine, right? Then here you gotta come in. You gotta maintain about 500. Was that 3 or was that 2? I felt like 3, wasn't it? How many did I have here? I had 3, I'm sorry. That's supposed to be 2. 3 would be even worse in my opinion. In fact, that was an example of bad map. Here, let me show you. I need to show you the difference between using 3 here and using 2. Because that in itself is the difference between good map flow and bad map flow. To use 3, like, it really depends on your speed. But usually when you're using 3, your entry speed needs to be at least 560 or higher. So if, like, your entry speed isn't at least, like, 560, then you're going too slow. So like that corner is extremely hard. But you see here, like the chicane right there, the flow doesn't really make sense because that corner I just took, I actually took it really slow. You can take that corner so much faster. But the thing is, I actually really like the start now because even though you have to slow down for the first corner, it primes you for the second corner. So even though I have to slow down here, it still primes me up for the second corner, right? So I can flow through this corner, but then when I get to this corner, then what? Like, I have to slow down so much at that point. The flow of the map, it doesn't feel good and it doesn't feel realistic. But you know what? There is a way around this. So there's 2 corners you can use here to maintain the flow of the map. So you can choose to use this corner, but what I do in TM 2020 is I like using this. So just by using 2 of these, you can completely change like the dynamics of the map and how it functions. So because of this, there's no edge at the end of this corner, so I can actually hold a pretty high speed. And let's say after you hold that high speed, I want you to turn into this corner and I still want you to hold a high speed, so I put this here, whatever, and you get to hold an even higher speed here. So this is just an example of like one corner that you can make. So if you're racing TWNE, these are types of maps that I make, and this is what you're gonna run into. But it's like there's gonna be a pretty big difference between using the previous corners I mentioned and using flat blocks, right? So the difference between flat blocks is at the end of this corner, once that railing ends, there's nothing stopping you. It's completely open. It's up to the player, how much speed they want to hold, right? So it's up to you as the map creator, what you want to use, and eh, like it's really really up to you. But this corner is actually kind of hard. So what you would have to do here is you would actually have to slow down a little more. But if you wanted to, let's say I wanted to eliminate this, right? Let's say I want you to actually just make this like a proper chicane. I can actually just completely eliminate that corner in general and then just use these. This is one of the advantages of mapping in TM 2020 versus mapping in TMU is that you don't need unlimiter to do stuff like this. You can just map it normally. And then you can just have people turn in basically right here. Of course, I would put like an arrow sign right here so people know where they're going. But here, now this is just no regular chicane, and you just turn into this corner, right? Actually, I might use this idea for like a map in TM 2020 for TW, and I actually kind of like this idea. But so previously it was decent, but not really good map flow, if that makes sense. Basically, the transition from one corner to the next wasn't very good. But now the difference is this is just a chicane that you turn into. This is how I make my maps. This is how I decide what do I want to do. So does the transition from one corner to the next make sense? There's a difference between making, just making a map harder in general to does the map have really good flow? If you want, in my opinion, if you want players to slow down, there needs to be a reason for that slowdown, right? If there's not a reason for that slowdown, that's when I start having issues. So if I were to, for example, I'm really gonna fuck up this corner. You're gonna see how bad I'm gonna fuck this corner up. I'm gonna really show you like where it really doesn't make sense. So that way it's pretty straightforward and clear. Then you just flow through that corner, so on and so forth. But here, let me show you what I mean about really, really bad map flow. To the point where it really just doesn't make any sense. So let me get rid of that. And I'm gonna push this out just a little bit. So let's say I decided to make this just, a straight, right? Yeah, you can probably already see where I'm going with this, can't you? it's it's gonna be pretty bad. Like it's gonna be obviously very bad for anyone that's made maps before or raced on pretty much hundreds of maps. This is obviously not gonna be a very good corner. So basically, this is specifically what I'm talking about when I talk about like bad map flow and making sure your flow matches the map. So normally you would expect to hold a lot of speed here, but you have to slow down a lot, right? And then there's a straight after. So the thing is, once you race on a straight like this, you start questioning, why the hell am I slowing down for a straight? Like, does that make sense? Like, there's a difference between turning in and then other things happening. But essentially, what's happening here is you're slowing down specifically for a straight. So, does the slowdown really matter that much? No, not really. But this is the issue that, a lot of map creators have is determining how their map is really going to flow here. And I would say, can you use this piece? Yes, 100% you can use this, but it really depends on how and why you're using it. So if I were to use a piece like this, I wouldn't use like, for example, a really long straight here. Instead, what I would do is I would use a much shorter straight. I would actually increase the difficulty of the map, by the way, not make it easier because that in turn will actually lead to better map flow, if that makes sense. It's really kind of hard to quantify that, but that's pretty much what I'm trying to get at here is I think it makes a lot more sense that if you want people to slow down, there needs to be a reason for people to slow down, right? It should be relatively obvious. And to make this a bit easier here, I'm going to put this at the end of it so that way you can maintain your speed throughout the corner. I'm going to show you the difference between using this and not using this. Like the flow is completely different depending on what you're trying to do with it. It's not the same. So it depends on what corner you're going from one to the next here. And that's what I'm really trying to get across here. It's not just, it's just bad map flow. It's what are you doing from one corner to the next, right? So you see here, now I can just go through, right? So that was pretty much a perfect example right there. I can go straight through this corner, but what happens if I, for example, remove this? Well, I'm probably not going to be able to go straight through this corner anymore, and that's gonna change a lot of things. So it's going to depend on, for example, right now I'm just using a long straight, but what if you're not using a long straight? Then what, right? So, but you can still even make good map flow even if you want people to slow down. It really just depends on where you're putting your, the parts of your track, right? So So even like without it, I can still hold a really high speed because TM 2020. But in a game like TMU, this is going to be so much harder. Like I'm pretty sure if any long-term TMU players could tell you that this corner is ridiculously hard. But in TM 2020, it's not that hard. But the other version of it gives more leeway. But however, let's say I wanted to do something stupid. Like let's say I wanted to do this. So this is really just gonna make it obvious that it doesn't make sense for map flow, like period. So this is really this is gonna be pretty bad. It's gonna be pretty terrible. So I can tell you right now, if you find yourself taking a corner like this, you want to take this as wide as possible, so that way your line is prepping you for the next corner. But let's say you didn't know you were taking a corner like this, right? So let's say you didn't know you were taking a corner like this. Well, this is what happens to you. So, like, it's a chicane, yes. Can you make a chicane like this? Yes. But does it make sense? No. You come off this corner going pretty much as fast as you humanely can, and then you hit this really slow chicane. It really just kind of messes with the flow of the map. Like if you know what I mean. It really kind of just it messes with it and not in a good way. So that's like, and whose right mind would want to slow down there that much, right? So it's less about it. Is it hard? Like no, it's just you have to slow down so much that it's not as enjoyable to race on as if you were to hold your speed. So it's really just not that enjoyable. So this is an example of bad map flow, and the reason why it's bad is just the straight's just not long enough for the amount of speed that you're holding. But you can fix that. That's actually not that hard to fix. So instead of having you hold such a high speed, you could hold like up to like 570 here, as I showed before. You can probably even hold more than that because Team 2020, and I don't know this game that well. So let's say I were to reduce this down to like one, right? So instead of having this be like a high speed corner into a really sharp chicane, then what you can do is you can just change this into a low speed corner into a really sharp chicane, and you're gonna notice like the difference is like night and day. So this is what I mean by map flows specifically versus a challenge. So in this instance, versus it rather just being a challenge, now the map flow will make a lot more sense, right? So they're going to go slow into here, but you know what? Since you're going slow into here, it doesn't really matter that much. Now, did I take that corner as good as I could? No, I didn't, but it's a pretty big difference. But not only can you make it better through doing that, you can also just do what I stated doing earlier. So let's say I noticed this corner was still like a little bit hard, right? So obviously this corner is still pretty hard, and the flow into the corner realistically speaking, is not that good. But to go from transition from this corner to the next corner, I don't even really need to do anything other than this really. So this increases the length of the straight a little bit, and this is pretty much a full speed corner. So you can even end this corner doing 590 to 600. A lot of my TWNE maps, if you want to beat my Brown's time on it, you would need to do that, for example. But here's the thing. This is like a 510 corner. So the max you're going to be doing here is 510. The max you can do here is like 590. So because the max is so much higher than the speed that you're going, that makes the flow just feel so much better. So you're going to be transitioning from one corner to the next. And this is the point that I'm trying to get across. Is that your transition from one corner to the next, that's what really matters here. It's not like how difficult you make your map or anything like that. It's how does your corner how does your map flow from one corner to the next? Like you see the big difference here? Like now I could just go. So instead of having to worry about like do I have to slow down or anything like that, I can just go like normally. Even if I were to in fact I would prefer to reduce this by like one or two straights just to get this map flow like perfect. Like the transition, what I mean by that is specifically the transition from one corner to the next. So there you saw that I still had quite a bit of straight left, right? So what if I remove a lot of that straight to get that perfect transition from one corner to the next. That's what I'm going to be looking for now is how do I build the perfect map flow here? Is how do I get the perfect transition from one corner to the next? So you're going to have to slow down into this one, turn into this one, and then you have some time to react here. So your time to react is pretty high. And then guess what? This is a 590 corner, so you can keep going. So even though I shortened, you see, I shortened the straight by 2, but because of this, this allows me to flow into the next corner pretty much perfectly. But if you don't have this, it's going to be much, not only harder, but the flow is just not going to be that good, and it's not going to be fun to race on. So I can show you like that difference now. Like there's only like a 2 difference here. Like the difference between using these type, 2 different types of corners is completely different. It's not going to be the same map anymore because the flow is different. Now you can have a purpose to that flow. For I'm going to show you after this, like if you want to change that, you can have a complete purpose to that flow, and what you want to do with the map is completely up to you. So that's actually not that bad. Okay, that's not that bad. Actually, let me see if I can maximize that. That's actually not that bad because I still have enough straights for it, right? Because I have enough straights for it and it's TM 2020, it doesn't feel that terrible. It actually feels pretty good still. No, I take that back. Okay, there you go. So if you try to basically that's the difference. I have to explain this to some people. If you try to maximize this corner, you're going to be punished for this corner because there's not enough straights here. So if I did like I would say 2 more straights here. This corner would be perfectly fine, but because it's only like 3 straights here, this corner is not very good. So if I only wanted this many straights, and as I stated before, I would just use this because this corner makes this corner pretty solid. That's pretty much the difference there. Now what did I want to show you? I'm trying to remember. Don't remember, but that is a pretty basically good explanation. Oh yeah, I remember. Okay. So let's say I did want you to slow down, right? So I'm going to show you like a different type of corner that's in NASCAR. So another type of corner in NASCAR, it's just a long corner like this, right? So this corner is all about precision, but depending on how you make your map and your map flow, this can be something completely different depending on how you make your map. So I think showing you an example of this corner is even like probably more important than what I was showing you before. So I'm actually going to delete all this, blah blah blah. It's trash basically. None of this is needed. I'm going to take this and put this over here. So I'm going to make the map much shorter because this point is pretty critical to understand this point. Okay. So I really need to hammer home the difference between making a map that flows from one corner to the next and a map that really kind of like doesn't, right? So here I can't really use the entirety of the corner just because of how it's not only just difficult, like the turn-in point isn't remotely the same, if that makes sense. So there's a lot of different ways you can do this. In my opinion, if you end up with a corner like this that has not so great map flow, what you have to do is you have to speed into the corner, then you gotta slow down so that you're over here, and then you have to maximize, this corner afterwards. That's how you have to handle precision corner like this. If you play NASCAR a lot, you're gonna have to deal with corners like that, a lot. However, I try to make, maps flow so you don't have to deal with that. So like if I'm gonna max out here, like you see, I don't have time to turn into this corner. I'm supposed to be doing around 430, but because this is too short, this turns instead of from a maximized corner into I need to slow down and then I need to slow down again. And I have to tell you, like personally, like you could try making this in a map editor and you can see for yourself, this doesn't feel very good. But if you add like I think it's like 2 straights to this, how you're going to take this corner is completely different. So basically, how you transition from this corner into this corner is completely different. And this is pretty much the point I'm trying to hammer home. It's like, how do you want your map to flow from one corner to the next? So you see here, now I have time to get to the edge of the map, right? Even though I'm going really fast. So the difference is, with this, I'm able to maximize this corner, and then I'm able to maximize this corner. With this, I have to slow down in this corner to maximize this corner. Now, whether or not you want to do that, it really depends on the map. In my honest opinion, from this corner going from here to a straight, in my opinion, this isn't acceptable. And the reason why it's not acceptable is because the flow, basically the transition. So when I say flow, I'm basically just replace that word with transition. The transition from this corner to the next doesn't make any sense. Especially not when I can just add two straights here, and the transition from this corner into this corner is perfect. So that's what I mean by mat flow is I now have to slow down in order to get the perfect transition into this corner versus I can maximize this corner and then I can maximize that corner. So that's what I mean by mat flow. How does the transition from one corner function to the other? But you don't necessarily need, to add a bunch of straights because, like I said before, there's a solution to that, right? So if I were to just take this, for example, I think it's like right here-ish. I could be wrong though. Yeah, so if I were to use this, like you're gonna see there's a pretty big difference between using this and not using this. However, I would recommend that if you're gonna use this to use another one on the exit because it would make it a lot better. I also want to show you the difference between, using that on the exit as well. So you see here, even with just that, I have more time to transition into this corner. So because I have more time to transition to the corner, the map flow just feels so much better, right? That's my point. I can still maximize this corner, and then the map flow still feels pretty good here. However, here's the problem with using the problem with using this corner for a long corner is that the mat flow sometimes tends to be worse. And the reason why it tends to be worse is because you can hold more speed going into the corner, but once you hit this apex, you need a certain angle and you need a certain amount of speed to go through it. So what I would actually recommend, so actually, hold on, let me show you. This can be useful, and there's a reason why this can be useful. Let's say right after this, like right here, I want there to be a corner, right? This time I'm going to make you turn again. This is where this becomes useful, right? Because your speed isn't as high, so you're actually not punished. So I'm going to show you. This is how you turn bad map flow into good map flow. So instead of having that and then going onto a straight, I can have you turn into another corner, right after that. Then this actually makes sense. So you gotta go a little slower than normal, right? But right after this, you turn directly right here. So bad map flow would be if I were to just make this a straight. This is bad map flow. This is good map flow. So instead of going onto a straight, now you're not so worried about maximizing this because there's a corner directly after this when you have to slow down. But let's say I did want to make this a straight. Now, if I wanted to make this a straight, what I would do to improve the map flow a lot better, basically transition from one corner to the next, is I would just do this. This is going to be a huge change. Or if you don't want to do this, you can also use the flat map parts now, and you can make this work as well. So there's more than one way to get this to work, right? And this is all I'm trying to say. Is that it's just how your corner transitions from one corner to the next. So, and that's what matters the most. So here I'm gonna have to slow down, but you see here I have a release at the exit. I have a release after this wall is over. I can actually maintain a very high speed because I don't have to worry about hitting the wall on the straight, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Like, it really depends on how you want to make your maps, but I really recommend that if you're going to make players slow down, there needs to be a reason for it. Like, as I was showing, like if this was another chicane turning to the right, this slowdown makes sense. If this is a straight like this, that slowdown doesn't really, it doesn't fit the map. That's what I mean by map transition and map flow. I hope I was a lot more clear this time. I'm not talking about just like how challenging something is, but literally how one corner goes into the next corner is what I'm specifically trying to reiterate here is can I maximize basically the best way to put this is can I maximize one corner and then maximize the corner after that? If I cannot maximize the corner after that, is there a good reason why I cannot maximize that corner? Is there a good reason why I should be going a slower speed at the exit of that corner? If the answer to that question is yes, then you're good to go. If the answer to that corner is no, for example, let's say I made this an even longer straight or something like this. If I made this an even longer straight and let's say I removed, this, imagine this is just a normal straight. This doesn't make sense, right? But the other version makes sense because in this version, even though this is a straight, you can still turn sharper and maximize this corner because now the flow is good and the flow makes sense. But if you use this and you don't have this or the other corner, then the flow really starts to not make sense, and there's just a specific reason or corner behind it, as I was showing, before with a right-hander, that there has to be a reason that you're slowing down. That's what I mean by map flow, is can you maximize from one corner into the next, or do you have to slow down? And if you need to slow down, is there a reason why you're slowing down, or are you just slowing down because the map creator told you to? So that's the difference between good map flow and bad map flow. It's not just is it harder or do you need to slow down? It's how does this corner transition into the next corner? Does the transition from this corner into the next corner actually make sense? Does the map actually flow from one corner to the next? These are the things that you need to think about as a map creator. Not only do you need to think about them as a map creator, like if you're trying to maximize your time and like on rounds, on time attack, whatever you're doing, especially on NASCAR, you need to really think about like what is the best line for this. So for example, if I took this out and I just had this, then you need to go wide here and then slow down to get the best line for this corner. But in my opinion, that's not very good map flow. So what I could do then is I can either choose to make them, the straight longer, or I can do this, which makes, no, this right here makes for much better map flow, unless I wanted to do the other version I was showing you earlier, which is, you know, basically just this, right? So I just put four there and then a right-hander. So because you can hold this right-hander at so much more speed in TM 2020, this map flow makes a lot of sense. So this does apply for pretty much all racing styles. So even though I primarily race NASCAR, this does apply to all racing styles, and this really doesn't matter. So it really depends on what you're trying to do with your maps and what you expect to, what are you expecting your players to experience? What type of experience do you want them to have? And I would also say if you're not the fastest racer ever, I would say make a few friends. Like I don't mind testing maps and stuff, especially for like NASCAR if you ask me to. And there's like different good players of all different types, especially in trackmania. If you ask them to test your maps, they'll do it for you and they'll tell you, what you need to improve on, what's not good and what is good and what they like. So you're 100% free to do that. So it's just an example of it's just kind of basic, but I hope it really does, nail home that point of what map flow means and how to make maps transition from one corner to the next. And like I said, this does apply to all versions of Trackmania, where they're playing Forever, Forever 2, United, so on and so forth, TM 2020. It applies to all of them. It doesn't matter if you're doing fun speed, full speed, NASCAR, RPG. RPG is a different kind RPG is a different kind of beast, but even RPG, you still want some kind of map flow, right? Yeah, like going from one corner to the next kind of still needs to make sense. If it doesn't make sense, the RPG is kind of a pain in the ass to play. But it this just gives you an idea. So if you would like to know more, then no, please by all means, ask. If you have any questions, please ask. I'm more than willing to answer them now.